Hey everyone, it's Horror Free for All, and I hope you're doing well today. I have here a movie review of a film that came out in the year 2007. And this film was written by Dan Angel and Billy Brown, who you might recognize were the head writers at one point for the original Goosebumps television show and the Haunting Hour TV show in the 2010s. And it was directed by a fellow named Alex Zom. And the film in question is The Haunting Hour. Don't think about it. Now, I have been jonesing to talk about this film for years. The problem is, sadly, is that I would watch the film and just never get around to reviewing it. But here we are, better late than never. And I have a lot to say about this movie. But I also want to, stress this to you. I know the infamous reputation that this film has. There seems to be a forgotten allure about this movie in the grand scheme of the Haunting Hour franchise because of how prolific the TV show was. Not a lot of people talk about the movie, or I guess the original intention of the franchise, I feel. So I want to shed some light on that, but first I should get into 2007 and when this movie came out and why this movie was a big deal when it originally came out. So between the years of 2003 and 2007, there was a period of time that I like to call the dark age of kids horror, where there was little to none kids horror books being released, and the main players in the genre were movies. However, there were mainly just like 5 movies that spread, from theme attraction rides to straight to TV movies, straight to video movies, or theatrical films, and even one that is basically kids horror, but not really, and you have to put an asterisk next to it because it was close enough. So when this movie came out in 2007, this was the tail end of the Dark Age, and a lot of people might consider this the ushering point of getting into what I call the Silver Age of kids horror, which was the rebirth of Goosebumps and what that entailed for a few years until the Goosebumps movie came out. So we're going to talk about a Dark Age kids horror film. This was the original intention, I feel, of the Haunting Hour franchise. From what I gathered, apparently Dan Angel and Billy Brown really wanted to work with R.L. Stine again after the falling out that happened when they left the show in season 3 of the original Goosebumps series. And they pitched this movie idea to R.L. Stine to, I guess, associate it with a short story collection that he put out in the early 2000s called The Haunting Hour. And Stine loved the idea, and they got together, I guess, some sponsors like Dasani and Papa John's, and they gathered the funds from that, I guess, and with the backing of Universal Family Entertainment, and they made this movie as a soft pilot of sorts for a bunch of R.L. Stine movies. Now, so the story goes, immediately after this movie released on physical media, Cartoon Network, of course, wanted to air the movie, and it was so popular and it got so many ratings that Dan Angel and Billy Brown took to their production company, which I think was The Hatching, and they started pitching around that The Haunting Hour needed a TV show because kids obviously were tuning into the movie. They thought it was scary, and they're like, they need to go back to basics like the Goosebumps show and bring The Haunting Hour to that medium. So I guess what happened was they abandoned the movie side of things and they put all their, I guess, eggs in one basket there. Thankfully, it paid off. But sadly for me, I would have loved to see The Haunting Hour continue with, I guess, at the minimum of 3 movies. Not all, I guess, pertaining to one over the other, I should say. But 3 standalone Haunting Hour movies I would have loved. Not saying that I didn't love the show. I just think it's a shame and a waste that they pivoted to mostly Ghostly, which is probably the most under-talked about R.L. Stine series, if I'm being honest, that he's ever put out. Maybe next to The Nightmare Room and Rotten School. And then they did that Monsterville movie, I guess, series attempt. There was supposed to be a second one that never happened. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked, right? All you need to know is that at the time, this movie was important and it spawned a show. Nowadays, when I see people talk about this film, People say that it hasn't aged the best, and I have to agree. When I was 13, I had a lot of appreciation for this movie, and I still have some nostalgia for it. But as an adult, this can be rough at times. This can be rough. This is one of those movies that has a really weak budget, questionable writing, a lot of cliches and tropes in the mix, but it does have some saving graces to it. Some ambiance, some fun monsters, and some genuine scares to be had. In terms of R.L. Stine movies that I've reviewed on this channel, this is probably the biggest mixed bag. I think I've so far done Zombie Town and When Good Ghouls Go Bad. As you'll see later on in the review, this might land somewhere in the middle for what that's worth, which isn't saying much because there's not big of a point difference between both of those movies. But we'll see in the end where I'm at with it. So with that being said, I have a lot to talk about. So now we're going to get into the plot of review of the movie without giving too much away. There will be some spoilers in here, so if you haven't seen the movie before, I suggest now that you click off, go, I guess, rent or buy this film digitally, or maybe get this on physical somewhere, wherever you can find it, and watch it, and then hear my review and the plot of review, of course. So, this film is about this 13-year-old girl named Cassie. She is a fish out of water into a new town. And it doesn't help her case that she's a goth girl, and basically this town that she's moved into is full of, I guess, normal people. And Cassie has this weird quirk about her where she loves horror, and she's, into the dark macabre, as we see her room is decorated and whatnot. But she also has this twang of vengeance and a twang of playing pranks to scare people. And we see in the very beginning of the movie, her little brother Max, who, bless the actor's soul, is trying his best. But Max is one of the most meme-worthy, overly stereotypical wimp kids I've ever seen in anything. And he gets annoying in this film. We see that Cassie pulls off this prank that scares her little brother, who's easily scared. And she gets, punished by her parents, for messing with him because of the move and how stressed out he is, and on top of him being scared about everything, right? But Cassie really does enjoy it. And she has, like I said, that dark passenger in her. But we see that this man with long, stringy white hair possibly is spying on her through her bedroom window outside of her home, which is really creepy, by the way. But we learn why later on in the plot. So the next day at school, we get to see Cassie in her element amongst her peers. And she has this, demeanor about her. She has her locker set up in this, macabre way, just like her bedroom. But she can't keep her eyes off this one guy named Sean. And Sean is like this stereotypical, pretty boy jock kid who all the girls pine over in school. And she, I guess, wants to be noticed by him, but is looking for like an in to be noticed, right? And then we see that, they have, I guess, kind of like a acknowledgement of each other, but obviously it's seeds for a romance that's going to be budding in the movie. Yes, this is a kid's horror movie with romance potentially in the mix, which I can take or leave. I most likely would prefer it not be in the film, but for what it's worth here, it's never gone too deep, so I don't mind it too much. But shortly after we get to meet Sean, we also get to meet the HBIC in school, who's named Priscilla. And Priscilla is going to be, I guess, the main human antagonist of the film. Priscilla is running for this position at this school dance because it's around Halloween, called Pumpkin Queen. And Pumpkin Queen is this, I guess, tradition that the popular girl wins at this school every Halloween. And when they win Pumpkin Queen, they get to, I guess, explode a piñata of candy at the school dance. And everybody gets to celebrate, and they get to, I guess, stew in the fun and glory of it all. And Priscilla also likes Sean. just as much as Cassie, I think. And Cassie tries to find an in with Sean when she overhears that he needs tutoring so he can, stay on his sports team and keep his dad happy. And Priscilla butts in and says, I can tutor you. And also, you can come with me to the dance and you can be my date and you can pick me up and we can have a fun time. So Sean, of course, agrees. And this, of course, pisses off Cassie to no end. And when that happens, of course, she's embarrassed by her peers. And we can see that Priscilla has it out for Cassie because I guess she can pick up with that girl catty nature that these two characters have, that they're both into the same guy and she's trying to mark her territory, right? So, wouldn't you know, Cassie's walking around town one day and she notices this whisper calling out to her from this alleyway. And this alleyway is like super skinny. And it says at the very end of it, like it was like a Halloween shop or something. So she walks inside, and there's nobody inside but this stringy-haired, white-haired man that we saw earlier in the film, and he's played by Tobin Bell, who is Jigsaw in the Saw movies. He essentially tells her that this is his store, and she can look around and try to buy something, and she's like, "Okay, well, this is a cool store," and she's looking around, and she gets kind of uncomfortable when this guy's like really pushy and wants her to go to the book section and look for something there. And she ends up doing so, and she finds that the book section is literally just a book that's called The Evil Thing. And The Evil Thing is like this leather-bound book that kind of looks like a diary or maybe something akin to, I guess, how the Necronomicon is built up in Evil Dead, right? But it has this skull lock on it and it requires a key to open it. And this guy, who I guess is called the Stranger, that's his character name, he tells her that he can give her the key if she buys the book, just name her price. And she gives him like $5, and he's like, "Okay, sold. The book is yours. And here's the key." So when Cassie leaves the store with her book, she's excited because, she's a fan of horror literature. She's a fan of the macabre. She notices that the store immediately closes, and she's like, "Well, I might as well open it up and see what this thing is." And when she opens it up, there's a warning that's kind of blipping in and out on the page saying, "Do not read this aloud." And as she's reading this, there's like stormy winds and, leaves blowing everywhere. And she notices that whenever she's trying to like turn the page, it gets like progressively more violent. So once the message becomes more clear, she closes the book and decides to hang on to it for later. Well, before we get to see what she's going to do with it, we get caught up to speed on the Pumpkin Queen dance, where she has, of course, attended because all of her other classmates are going to be attending as well. And she has brought with her some revenge to get on Priscilla for being basically a nasty girl to her and, outright trying to embarrass her. So she pours cockroaches into the pumpkin piñata, which, of course, Priscilla busts on stage, and she gets embarrassed in front of the entire class, and everybody laughs at her expense, which is awful, but it's kind of comeuppance here, and she does deserve it. So when the next day at school happens, we see all these posters in the aftermath have been tainted with her like looking like a bug and what have you there. And Priscilla has this feeling that it was Cassie who did this. So in looking for revenge in the classroom, she looks over at Sean and tells Sean to reach into her bag and grab the book that ends up being The Evil Thing. She opens it up as Cassie's talking about Halloween to the class, and she, I guess, jots down some notes to use at her disposal later on Halloween night, later that night, to get some revenge on her. So, turns out that day, after the Evil Thing book was read by Priscilla, that it's Halloween night, and Cassie is going to be forced to having to take her little brother Max, who is scared of everything. I haven't even touched on this scene, but there's literally a scene where this kid is watching his parents play a game that has squirrels dropping nuts on things. And he says that it's too scary. So this is what we're dealing with. And Max has picked his costume out to be like this pirate or something. I guess they're pulling tricks out of Haunted Mask left and right with this movie. You got, a Halloween shop, a kid dressing up like a pirate. I mean, come on now. But anyways, Cassie takes out Max as their parents are getting ready to go to a Halloween party or something for the night. And she, I guess, takes Max out to go trick-or-treating, and Max gets upset that he doesn't have enough courage to go up to a house to get wax vampire lips, and makes a whole big spiel about it. So when he comes home, he throws basically a temper tantrum, trying to blame Cassie on how he didn't get to get his teeth and how she ran away from him and she has to defend herself and whatnot. And the parents are like, okay, we don't have time for this. Cassie, get Max ready for bed and, don't stay up too late, right? So Cassie goes to her room, I guess, to write some horror fiction or maybe a blog or something. And for some reason, Max all of a sudden is like, you know what? I want to be told a scary story. Okay, why not? And he does so by clicking off her computers to get her attention. And because she's so mad at Max, she's like, okay, fine, I'll read you this book that you want me to read, because he notices the Evil Thing book nearby her computer. So she goes into his room and reads the story aloud. And it ends up being like this very short and sweet story, but at the very end of it, it says, essentially along the lines of, the monster that was described in the story, don't think about it. Because if you think about it, it can come alive, right? And it's described to be like this two-headed monster that has like eggs on the back, and it's really gross sounding. And the kid is mortified, of course, when he hears the story being read to him. And once his sister leaves and says goodnight, he starts to think about it and then freaks out even more and runs to her and says, oh, I thought about it. It's going to come and get me, blah, blah, blah. And then he starts to hear noises, stuff coming out from outside of his window, and he starts to freak out even more. And then the power shuts out, which, of course, sets him off into another frenzy as well. So he follows Cassie outside as she thinks that the power went out because of a blown fuse. And it turns out that it's Priscilla and Sean playing a prank on Cassie for what she did on Priscilla at the dance. And it may involve like something hanging nearby the fuse box that scares her. And Priscilla has recorded the whole thing, and it's revealed that Sean had a boom box with some sound effects, which coaches Max into thinking that maybe he didn't awake this beast, and maybe he can go to bed that night and be okay. So once it's revealed that Cassie got humiliated, she's upset with Sean that her crush has sided with, like, I guess her biggest enemy at school, and she doesn't know how to feel anymore. So when she goes inside, she's clearly upset and more frustrated than anything and just wants to be left alone for the rest of the night. But Max still is wound up and possibly thinking that there's something possibly moving in his closet. Well, I should say that not too long after the thing with Priscilla and Sean happened at Cassie's house, we see that a creature possibly has come out of the ether in a pile of leaves. And there's a Papa John's delivery driver that is the first victim of this attack. And it has now made its way to Max. And we see this whole scene that drags out for a little while, where Max is trying to hide desperately from this monster, wreaking havoc in his room. And he's trying to get his sister's attention, and she's just trying to ignore him, screaming at him, telling him to stop playing around. She's tired for the night. And of course, something happens to Max there, where he's taken, right? So we get cut back to speed on Cassie and Sean. Priscilla and Sean from there. And we see that Sean has a falling out with Priscilla because of Priscilla's intentions and her threatening helping him with his, paper and whatnot, so he can stay on the team, on a sports team or whatnot. And Sean's like, you know what? I don't care. Do what you must. But then we see Priscilla get attacked by this creature that has come after Max and the Papa John's delivery driver, and something happens to her. And Sean sees this. He sees the monster in action, and the people covered in this white slime, which is absolutely disgusting. And his first reaction is to run to Cassie, because Cassie would know what to do. And when he goes to Cassie's house, he basically forces himself inside and claims that it wasn't just Priscilla being taken, it was Max. And he thinks that Max isn't upstairs and wants to prove it to Cassie, who thinks that he is. So when he goes upstairs, they both realize that Max isn't in his room, and there's some slime nearby the windowsill. And Cassie's like, okay, you must be telling the truth. So maybe by reading this story, we accidentally activated this creature that could be real. So we need to figure out a way to kill this thing. So they try to go find this thing at first, and they end up finding it in the sewer system below the town. And when I say that this stuff is creepy, y'all, I mean, this looks straight out of an Alien movie. Like these, people being tied up in like webbings, and they have this, like I said, white fluid, and they're screaming their full heads off to be saved and whatnot. And the creature looks absolutely terrifying to no end, man. And once Cassie and Sean have a close call, they realize that they're in over their heads. They need some answers, and maybe the only person that can help is the stranger. So pulling, a textbook play from The Haunted Mask, Cassie and Sean head to the shop where the stranger is thought to be. And when they get there, the stranger is leaving town. And Cassie's like, what are you doing? You sold me the book. You got to help me. And the stranger's like, look, I look for a person every Halloween, but I'm always looking for the person that wants to scare people the most. And I settled on you this year. And I did what I was out to do. And now I got to go. So Cassie's like, well, you got to help me figure out how to stop it. And he gives some like ominous, saying to leave her off with for her and Sean to kind of ponder together. And then he drives off out of the film. But once that happens, Cassie and Sean put 2 and 2 together from the ominous message that blood is needed, because in order to stop the monster, they need to have it attack itself, and they're going to use, I guess, animal blood to make that happen. Now, they're not going to go out and kill an animal like a fresh kill or anything. There is some meat, I guess, Cassie is preparing in the house for some reason that has some blood inherently in it. So they go back to Cassie's house and they drain the blood into, I guess, this holder, and they're going to take it down to the sewer, and they're going to try to throw it onto the creature by luring it with Sean's boombox with noises to get it to attack itself and make it disappear, and then they can save all the people that are trapped down there. But when they get down there, it's revealed that the monster's babies have hatched from its back and is trying to go, I guess, eat. And the first person they're going to go eat, I guess, is Max. So they have a little bit of, a time urgency going on. And from there, we get to see them re-enter the sewer, and the plan may or may not play out into their favor, and we possibly get a role reversal for Max and see him overcome this scaredy cat nature that he's been put into the entire film. And once the climax is over, we see that there's some characters involved that make it out all right, and maybe the rest of Halloween night go by smoothly. And the people that are left in the story, and once the resolution is over by the ending, are at Cassie's house, and they decide to dispose of the Evil Thing book once and for all. And once they think it's done, they might, pack up for the night, and they're going to, live on to the next day and try to move on from this experience. But of course, Cassie's parents come home, possibly find remnants of the book, and from there, as you can tell, the story might not be over. So that, in a nutshell, is R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour. Don't think about it in terms of its story. Now, I want to start off with some positives, because I do have a lot of positives about this movie, surprisingly. One of the things I think that this movie kind of gets right is the acting performances, for the most part. I think Tobin Bell, who plays the stranger, is fantastic. I think Emily Osment, who plays Cassie, you might recognize Emily Osment from like Hannah Montana or maybe the George and Mandy show as of recent years. Obviously, she was a kid in this movie here, but yeah, I mean, she was fantastic as Cassie. Cody Lindley, I recognize him from a lot of things growing up. He's fine as usual. Some people do have a problem with his acting in this movie. He is kind of stock and basic. To me, he was always that dime store Austin Butler growing up. So take that for what you will. But he's serviceable here. I think the star of this movie, surprisingly, is the girl who plays Priscilla. I think her name is Brittany Curran. She's fantastic. She plays the HBIC character very well. And I'm shocked that Hollywood never gave her like a starring vehicle, like in like a comedy movie or something, because I think she would have been fantastic. But yeah, great cast. The only character I really don't like in this movie, or in the actor performance, is Max. He, I've never seen this kid in anything outside of this movie, but he's not the greatest in his character, and I guess the material he's given does not help it. But aside from that, everybody else did a really good job for what they were given. I will say, for this being a Halloween-centered movie, surprisingly, this has some really decent atmosphere given the budget of the movie. To put this into perspective, this honestly feels like a Haunting Hour TV show budget, but somehow, by some miracle, they stretched the budget out enough to make a movie that was, let me see how many minutes this thing is, 87 minutes. You could have fooled me, but like I said, the atmosphere for it being a Halloween movie surprisingly does work, given the budget. This is passable stuff. Whether we're talking about the Halloween story, even, I think that was really well done. And Cassie's bedroom was really fun. The Halloween dance at school even was fun, even though the costumes look kind of cheap. Which leads me to the music of this movie. There's some solid stuff in here. Like, there's some like alternative rock songs that obviously are like, I guess, more independent people. Like, you're not going to recognize some of these artists in this film, but the alternative rock soundtrack and the heavy reliance on that mid 2000s like indie emo stuff did kind of work here for this film. I was not expecting that, and I forgot that was even a thing in this movie until I watched it this time around, and I have a whole new appreciation for the music of this movie, weirdly enough. Not the music video that this movie ends on. We'll get into that in the negatives very shortly, but for the most part, yeah, the music was really well done. And if I haven't said it, I think that this is the scariest movie with R.L. Stine's name attached to it, and a lot of it has to deal with the creature effects. They are absolutely fantastic. I have nothing else to say. It's hard to believe that this was marketed as a kid's horror movie at times, with how just out there they go with the horror. It's creepy. It works. There's something about it. The climax, fantastic stuff. And that's all I'll say. Stuff you don't expect to see in kids' horror. But definitely stuff that felt like a throwback to peak Goosebumps in the 90s in the TV show and what would later become in Haunting Hour even. So, yeah, fantastic stuff involving the monster, or the thing called the evil thing, right? And its babies. Love it, love it, love it. But with that aside, let's get into the negatives. There's some pretty pronounced ones here. I think the first negative, I think people will notice off the bat, is how cliche the plot is. I want to say maybe like the first 27 minutes of this movie, because I know this movie's like 87 minutes. The first 27 minutes of this film is just exposition setup, trying to introduce us to these characters that aren't really that interesting when you really think about it. The most interesting character of this whole movie is Cassie. Everybody else is a blatant stereotype, exacerbated stereotype, or bland stereotype. And they're not expounded on in anything too meaningful. But you get a general gist on the rivalry between Cassie and Priscilla, even though the links it goes to in the movie doesn't feel all that believable because they don't really have all that much of a catty relationship other than the lunchroom scene beforehand. And then, the character of Sean, he's kind of irritatingly written because he's supposed to be that character that, they pulled that Casper 1995 trope with Priscilla and Sean, with those two bully characters that were bullying Kat in that movie. They're no different here. And we have the cliche of the Halloween dance. Take a shot if you've ever seen that in a Halloween movie. We have the cliche of the romantic interest of the goth girl trying to get the hot guy who's into the popular girl, and the popular girl is into him. Take a shot if you've ever seen that in a movie. Take a shot if you've ever had a kid's horror story where the main characters are kids that move from a different town. It's just cliche after cliche after cliche. And it's kind of annoying. It gets in the way early on in the movie. But once the film kicks on, you do kind of see the creativity come out. But I would say, even then, once the film starts to kick on, it feels like the budget progressively just gets worse and worse and worse as time goes on. And you can clearly tell that they put all the budget into the creature effects, first and foremost, over everything else in this film. But yeah, story-wise, predictable plot beats, kind of throwaway things here too, getting into some smaller things like the stranger, what exactly is this stick? Why exactly was Cassie picked? I mean, I guess it's said in the movie, but the believability there isn't the greatest, right? Just kind of all over the place things. There's really not that much happening in the plot once the monster stuff kicks on. Really only 3 people get abducted. This could have been a much larger scale story, but it is what it is. So yeah, the plot is kind of weak, but I guess it's serviceable. The second big thing that I don't really view this as a negative, but I think it's annoying how blatant it is the product placement in this movie. Holy crap. Dasani Water and Papa John's got their money's worth with this movie. Not only did the school have that mid-2000s over-the-top, I think it was the Aqua Splash or whatever it was called, Dasani machine in the lunchroom on full display in every shot, or the Papa John's delivery driver, and them quoting pizza deals as lines of dialogue. I mean, good God almighty, the product placement in this movie really does hamper it. I mean, I'm going to open up my DVD real quick so y'all can see. This was so ingrained that Papa John's literally gave you a coupon when you bought this movie to order pizza to get a free cheese stick. I mean, come on, man. Come on, don't play with me. Stop it. Stop it, stop it, stop it. It felt too forced down your throat. There's even a scene after the resolution of the climax where the kids are eating a Papa John's pizza and they're talking about how good it is and how it's the most delicious thing they've ever eaten. Get out of here with that. It's cringy. I'm over it. So, moving from that point, the third main negative is Max. Max, he is the inciting incident of the entire film. He's not only the most annoying character, he's basically a meme. He gets under my skin. I cannot stand his character, even in the climax when he's supposed to get that arc. It's annoying how he behaves the entire movie. It's almost like getting barraged by nails on a chalkboard. That's the equivalent to having to endure his character. Like I said, no offense to the actor, this kid who plays the character Max, but yeah, good riddance. Good riddance. Once this movie is over, you never have to deal with him again if you don't want to watch it again. But for me, yeah, he does really tank this movie. And I guess we can go ahead and talk about the music video thing that the movie ends on. Yeah, once the film ends and the cliffhanger is done, it forces you to watch this cringy, and I mean cringy, Emily Osment music video with horrible editing, horrible soundtrack dubbing, and that is the entire credit sequence. post-credits. Why? Why did mid-2000s movies do this? I know the Even Stevens movie did this as a kid, and that irked me there. But I always forget that they do it here. And they even try to advertise it. Hey, kids, go buy this movie just to watch an Emily Osment music video. Why? Why is that the focus? Why can't we put R.L. Stine's face on here? Hey, kids, watch something with R.L. Stine associated. No. Emily Osment music video. And I guess that was probably part of the deal of her doing this, was she gets to make a single and sit it out on iTunes and make money off of it. My fiance, of all people, knew this song, so I guess she heard about it, even though she never watched this movie growing up. So that should tell you that I guess it worked on that regard, but nonetheless, it's absolutely cringe. So it leads me to my final thoughts about this film. Sadly, I want to really love this movie as much as the nostalgia I have for it. And I knew how much this meant to me as an 8th grader, as somebody who was jonesing for new kids' horror content in a time where none of it was coming out. And when this movie came out on Cartoon Network, it was like I said earlier, is that swan song to my middle grade years, getting something that I wanted. And even though I got Monster House the year before, and then Zathura the year before that, those two movies and this really personified my middle school years and my love of kids horror, alongside rediscovering Goosebumps books and rewatching the show on Cartoon Network back in the day. So I owe a lot to this movie around that time for keeping me invested in kids horror, especially near the tail end of it. But if I'm being honest, it does not hold up. It's kind of a weak movie. The budget, really, I think, is probably the all-around most damning thing about it. And it looks inferior to films like Zombie Town and When Good Ghouls Go Bad on that front. However, because of the positives I have with it, and especially because it's able to be scary, I'm actually willing to say that I think I like it more than Zombie Town, and almost like it as much as I do When Good Ghouls Go Bad. But because I gave Zombie Town a 3.3 out of 5 stars, because I gave When Good Ghouls Go Bad a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and as you can imagine, this movie will get in between that with all the problems I mentioned, and I'll give this film a 3.4 out of 5 stars. This is a D+ movie, not quite a C-. Like I said, there is some less than to be desired things about this film. It doesn't even feel like a movie at times. It feels just like a prolonged episode stretched out to 87 minutes. But for what it's worth, the scares really does save it. If it didn't have that monster and wasn't able to be scary like that, this would honestly probably be a D-. But, you know, it has it. And it has that it factor. So I wouldn't say this is a waste of time. If you're a fan of R.L. Stine and you haven't seen this movie before, you need to go check it out. If you're a fan of the Haunting Hour television show from back in the day, you need to check this movie out if you haven't seen it. And maybe if you have seen this movie in the past and you haven't seen it in a while, give this thing a rewatch for this year around Halloween and see how well it holds up for you. You might be able to appreciate it a little bit more or less, depending on, you know, where you're at with it currently. But that's just my opinion and my recommendation to you all to do so. So yeah, this is my thought on R.L. Stine's The Haunting Hour. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen this film before. Did you love it? Did you hate it? I'm dying to know, and I'll see you next time.